But after the arrest of the skipper, the investigation was not concluded as usual. And in fact, the usual way to lead this kind of investigation is to arrest the skipper, try him, and possibly send him back to his origin countries. But in this case, the fact that the crime was so serious and the effects were so big that was decided to conduct a different kind of investigation, also applying the tools used traditionally used in mafia crime. An investigation was launched to try to identify the other member of the criminal group that organized this kind of a trip from Central Africa to Lampedusa that was that ended with the death of so many persons. The first step was to acquire the statements given by the survivors that described their nightmare trip from Eritrea to Lampedusa, the road through the desert, where most of them were kidnapped, were tortured, and were forced to pay a ransom for their release. And after the payment of the ransom, they were given to other criminal groups to bring them till the shore of Libya, where they're forced to pay again for the trip by boat that led them that was conducted with the death of most of them. To give you an idea, the survivors told us that they paid more than $5,000 for this kind of trip that was conducted in a very inhuman conditions. And after the statements given by the survivors, and after use of a very highly specialized technical tools such as investigation, such as intercept, wiretappings, and similar instruments, the whole group, the whole criminal group organizing this kind of hope travels was identified, and not only the main traffickers operating in Central Africa, in Sudan, in Libya, and in the Maghreb, but also the support group operating in Italy. The public prosecutor issued an arrest warrant and subsequently validated by the investigative preliminary judge. And nowadays we can see that one of the most important criminal group operating in this field, was identified, even if for the lack of a judicial cooperation by countries such as Libya or Sudan, the two main persons are still at large and were not extradited to Italy, but on the other side, all the members operating on Italian territory were identified and arrested, and most of them were already tried and convicted to very high sentence between 20 and 30 years in jail. Which are the main issues in an investigation like this? First of all is the condition of the person, the survivors in this case, the person that accused, given the statement of accuse against the traffickers. Because, as I told you at the beginning, in many European countries, such as Italy, unfortunately, the illegal migrant is still considered an author of a crime, the crime of illegal immigration, and so is not considered on the same level of a common witness. So there are many logistics problems, such as the necessity for them of, for example, a defense counsel when they give their statements, or also the possibility for them to refuse to respond to the interview of the police or the prosecutor. Another big problem is the language, is the translation, because in countries like this, sometimes we have not only very rare language used, such as Eritrean or Somali, or Somali is not so easy to find interpreter, as well, and the overall reliable interpret on this in these languages, but also there are so many different dialects that is not easy sometimes to find a person that really know the language. A third problem is the prosecutability for crimes committed abroad. As I told you, for example, in this case, many of the survivors were also tortured, killed and kidnapped in Central Africa, and so when they gave us their statements accusing the persons, the problem was that most of the crime were committed abroad, and also the use of the investigation tools to be used were abroad. So we could, for example, use intercepts for conversation abroad between the different person operating in Africa, but is still is not sure if they are, according to Italian case law, likely they can be used, because they used an Italian apparatus for the communication, but the legislation is not the same in all European countries. Last problem is how to ensure the presence of the witness until the celebration of the trial, because most of the persons arrived in Italy with this travel want to immediately fly and escape to other countries, especially in the northern Europe. So it's not easy to ensure their presence in national territory until the celebration of the trial. And this can affect, of course, the importance of their evidence during the trial. And so it's important for the prosecutor to balance the public interest to a trial and for the possible conviction of a crime perpetrator of a crime, on the other side, or the respect of the human rights of the migrant that want to leave the country and go somewhere else. But in this case, we were the investigation was well conducted. Was also lucky enough to ensure us the final results, and with the identification of almost 15 members of this criminal group. 13 of them were arrested here in Italy, 2 are still at large, no, 3 are still at large, 12 were arrested, 3 are still at large in some foreign countries. The last part of my video will be the possible international perspective on fighting the trafficking of human beings. And I think that the question that the interpreter, the prosecutor, the judge, the person who studied this kind of phenomenon must put themselves is if human trafficking might be considered a crime against humanity. I think there are the legal route for this. Article 7 of the Rome Statutes that instituted the International Criminal Court include a list of acts that, when committed as part of a widespread or systematic attack directed against any civilian population with knowledge of the attack, will constitute a crime against humanity. In the list of this crime, there is, of course, murder, extermination, and so on, but there is also the deportation or forcible transfer of population, and the imprisonment of other severe deprivation of physical liberty in violation of fundamental rights of international law, torture, and so on. I think that the inclusion of deportation or forcible transfer of population in the list of crime against humanity in case of a widespread or systematic attack directed against any civilian population in a context of war, could be extended also in beyond the existence of a war. And I think also in the case law of these ad hoc courts, such as the ICTY, the criminal court for the crime committed in former Yugoslavia, can lie the foundation for this principle. For example, in the case of Kunarac et al., the ICTY trial chamber accepted in relation to the trafficking of women in wartime that enslavement may occur even when the victims still enjoy the jure certain freedom of movement, but the situation in which they find themselves leaves them with no real choice of escape, with the prospect of conducting an independent life. Although the judgment of the CTY was rendered in relation to wartime, for the CTY's jurisdiction over crimes committed against humanity only if occurred during times of war in the territory of the former Yugoslavia, the views expressed by CTY on enslavement could serve as a precedent for similar cases brought in a peacetime context. Accordingly, if enslavement or slavery is the characteristic feature of human trafficking, can be inferred that at least in its most serious expression, human trafficking should be qualified as a crime against humanity, both under general international law and under statutes of the ICC. The recognition of a human trafficking as a crime against humanity, of course, can be conducted to an institution of an international special court for trafficking human beings, or for the creation of an ad hoc tribunal, such as happened before for the crime committed in some specific territory, like in Lebanon, like in the former Yugoslavia, like Rwanda, and so on. Or another possibility, the jure condemned, of course, could be the institution of a European Court for trafficking case. This could be help the investigators to cope with the most important issue on this topic, such as the lack of judicial cooperation between the different states, the setup of a sort of international police to deal with this phenomenon, and so on. I thank you for watching the video until this moment, and I conclude here my presentation. Thank you again. Bye.